All right, I think I'm live. Let's go. Good evening, everyone. I'm getting started a little later today, just because my schedule today was a little different. I'm about to get into Khan Academy. I'm showing you my screen right now, and maybe for some of you guys who may not have been following thus far, and you're just sort of jumping in right now, Khan Academy has basically all these sections for the SAT. Has generic information about the SAT, about Khan Academy itself, about overall strategies. Okay. What I'm specifically doing this week is I'm going through the reading test. We went through all of the four what do you call it, full passage walkthroughs. So I just finished all of that yesterday. And now instead, and this other stuff, I just sort of like zoomed through. I went through those very, very quickly. Now, starting today, I want to go through these strategies. And after we do the strategies, then I think on Thursday in Eastern time, I could go over the writing stuff. The primary thing I am doing right now is I'm not here to focus so much on like for any given any given test that you might be taking, for any given practice test you might be taking, why question 33 is not A but actually B, because A seems like it would be more persuasive for whatever reason, and the book says B. Now I can do that, and I don't mind doing that right now in Discord, but for the streams, I just want to go over more of like the strategies for like the actual how-to, the know-how of getting the right answers. So I'm less focused on the content of every single question and more focused on like the content of how to get the answer correct, how to manage your time, stuff like that. All right, so I'm just gonna go through these today. And that starts over here, active reading strategies. This is from my dashboard as a learner. So this is my learner home, okay? If you want, and now it's, we only have about including today, three more evenings to study. So you might find that this is all a little bit overwhelming. But if you want to join our Khan Academy, if you're not overwhelmed, you want to join the Khan Academy class that I started. I'm not really managing anybody. I'm just giving you the assignment itself, and you can just sign up and go through the assignments with us, and that might help you get a little bit more out of this time. Okay, well, let's get into. I've done all this, right? Yeah, I've done these 4 passages. So let's go into active reading strategies. SQ3R. Okay, and so again, just to be explicit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically be reading this information for the first time, just like all of you, well, maybe like some of you guys. Okay, I'll be reading all of this for the first time, and I'll just be giving my 2 cents on how helpful I find this advice, and if I can add anything that might be additionally helpful for different people in different situations, then I'll just try to add what I can. What is SQ3R? It's a popular system designed to strengthen reading muscles. Survey, question, read, recite, and review. And it helps you understand more when you read it the first time. That sounds great. Now let's actually see what it actually does. Resist the temptation to jump right into reading the passage. Glance through the passage to identify the subject matter, the point of view, and the overall purpose. Whew, 2 minutes. Yo, I don't think... Guys, up until this part, my level of agreement from like 0 to 10, where 10 means I absolutely agree, this is exactly the words I was looking for, and they just said it for me, okay? I would say I agreed with this maybe to like, 6 or 7. It's like generally agree. I don't know if it's really necessary when you have something like a blurb, to really set you up already. But sometimes you kind of want to do a quick skim just to kind of get a vibe for what you're looking at, right? Sometimes. But it's not something you should do robotically because you feel like that's the right step. You should do it because you are naturally going to do it because you want to, because you have some sort of question in your head and you're trying to answer it, right? You read the blurb and you're like, oh, I wonder if this is going to have like 2 studies or like 3 studies or just like 1. And then you kind of skim it and then you find out, oh, it's like, there's not even a single study. This is just the guy's experience, right? And then you can kind of answer your questions. And this is something you do organically, naturally. So I'm not against this idea of surveying, but I don't think you should force yourself to survey it. Okay? Which is why I was like a 6 out of 10 in terms of how much I agreed with this part. But then I read this and now I'm like almost a 0, like a 1 out of 10. I'm like 1 out of 10 for this because, dude, I don't know what they mean it, but if it takes 2 minutes, you've already lost the game, bros. You've already lost the game, man. What, 2 minutes just skimming the thing? Dude, that's not good. No, this is too much. No. Anyway, I talked a lot about this in the last 3 days. Weird names? Why weird names? I don't understand this. What? Okay, I agree with this. I don't agree really with any of this, although let me explain line by line exactly what I think. Skim the first sentence of every paragraph. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say read the first sentence, and as you read the first sentence, try to predict what's going to happen for the rest of that paragraph, right? But then once you're in the middle of that paragraph and you're kind of lost, go back to that first sentence, reskim it so that you can catch your breath, figure out what you're talking about. But that's as far as you should do it. Don't survey the questions. I talked about this a lot yesterday and the day before. Okay, so I'll skip that. Only do this if you are absolutely daunted by the passage. Okay, and it's more, and you know that you're going to take emergency measures intentionally. Okay, so you should never. I'm not saying never do this, but it should be a pretty critical, mission critical decision. And circle winners. I would say circle anything that's that you want to see again, just so you don't forget. So anything you think you're going to forget that you don't want to forget because it's like a name or something, right? You want to see it again, just circle it. Okay, you can have a lot of circles. It doesn't have to be 3 to 4. It could be like 8 or 9. It's fine. As long as but at the point at which you're starting to get circled like 20 words, and now your text has so many circles that your eyes are not even going to really respond to it. I think having too many circles is possible, but like anywhere between 3 and 12, honestly, is like manageable, I think, for your eyes. So circles are good for when you want your eyes to quickly be able to jump back to that word or to that phrase. So. And I don't see how circles is something you would do before doing the real reading. That's kind of strange, honestly, to me. Very strange. I would circle as I read. So, okay, let's get this. "30 seconds or less." This is so broad as to be not as helpful as it could be, but I agree with this. Again, I'm going to use that 10-point scale. I agree with all of this, maybe 5 out of 10. Okay, 6 out of 10. I agree with it in spirit, but not in details. Okay, so let's go with what I mean. So I agree that, it helps you get excited. Cool. It helps you get interested. Cool. Yeah, you are more likely to grasp the point. Cool. All that's true. Okay. First problem. 30 seconds is kind of long. Okay, it's a lot better than that 2 minutes for that surveying where you're not even doing the real. Okay, it's a lot better. But 30 seconds is it's a little long. And then coming up with a couple questions. These examples are not very specific. So I'll tell you the kinds of questions. See, that's the thing. When you think questions, I think it creates all this burden to come up with a question, which I don't think anyone really does. What I would rather now, if I could do the questions version of this. When I read a blurb and it says that it's that there are two authors. The first author wrote this in like 2011, and he or she said that the web is harmful for brains. And then this second author wrote in the same year and said that actually the brain that the web isn't so bad. Okay. Now, when I see that, the questions I have is, why could the web be bad for your brain? Stuff like that. See? But instead of asking a question, I think it's more, you could be more aggressive, and by being more aggressive, you can actually save yourself a lot of time. By just being like, oh, if I were to make an argument about the web being bad, I would probably say stuff like ABC and just make a bunch of predictions. Predict what the first part of that passage is probably going to be about. Predict the way that you think that passage is probably going to end. Just predict, have like a simulated version of a passage in your brain. Then you don't have to ask yourself questions. What you can do is by comparing your simulation back to the actual reading, just the comparison itself, you'll actually end up answering all of those questions you had in the first place. Okay? And it doesn't have to be a very precise simulation either. It could just be like a rough sense of like, oh, I would probably come up with 2 examples of why it hurts people. A weaker example and like a more extreme example, and then put those 2 together and then finish my case. Okay, maybe it could be as broad as that. Now, if you happen to know a lot about neuroscience or whatever, then maybe you can actually fill it in with some prior knowledge, like what you're imagining the arguments could be about. By doing so, you'd be able to kind of get across this. You can get what this step is trying to do, but do it in a much more natural way. Whereas I feel like if I were just to ask myself, what is this passage about? Why does this passage exist? I don't know if I would feel very interested asking myself those questions. I don't think that's how a really genuinely interested person is reading. There's not just asking themselves questions that a teacher would ask them. I don't think that's very natural. So, that said, on face value, this isn't terrible. It's not bad advice. Actually, generally speaking, I do agree with it. It's just that I think there's a much more straightforward, momentum creating, generative momentum approach, which is just predict what the passage will be like. I'll give you an example of what I mean, actually, now that I think about it. When people watch a movie, like there's like a love triangle, there's like a couple, they're sort of, vanilla, pretty boring couple, oh no, that's not a love triangle, sorry. There's like a nerdy boy, kind of cute girl, and then like this like hot guy, but then the hot guy likes the nerdy boy or something like that, right? Wait, what? I forgot what love triangles are. Anyway, when you have like a sort of story that starts a certain way, you start making naturally, if you're really interested, if you're interested in this story, you start making assumptions about the way that the story will go, right? And through the experience of having those assumptions subverted, you start feeling like when the thing that you thought wouldn't happen happens, right? That's when you start feeling surprised and you get very interested in the story. When it goes exactly as you predict, it tends to not be as interesting, right? It's the same thing with reading. Same thing with reading. You should try to imagine in advance what a typical thing would be like, and by doing that, you would start finding yourself surprised as you read along, and that surprise is the thing that keeps you interested. All right, that's my commentary on step 2. Let's go to step 3. SQ3R, R1, R2, R3. R1, read. It's so funny. Start reading the passage actively. See, that's the thing. The word actively is this thing that it's really hard to even imagine what it is. You can't physically see somebody do it, you know? Wow, he's being so active. Look at that reading. So passive, man. So active. It's such a hard and abstract word that I don't think it's a very good, it's not a very good command. Like, if I tell you, hey, be cooler, like, how comprehensible is that to you? To me, it would be very, well, I guess it could mean one thing. Hey, be cool, be cool, be cool. Like, tone your volume down, you know. Like, if you're saying, if you mean that in terms of like cool down your sort of your energy, then it could be like be cool. And that has more of a literal meaning. But yeah, be a cooler person. You know, that's like really hard to parse. Read more actively. Yo, I'm already using my brain. Like, it sounds like you're just telling me to pay more attention because you think I don't have a lot of attention. Like, I don't really know what that means, right? If you tell me, if you watch me read and you're like, you're not being very active, it's like, how am I supposed to be more active? So I don't like this idea here, or at least not in the form of a command, you know. Instead, I would rather that if I were a student, I would rather hear more of the practicals of what I should be doing. Okay, so let's look at these examples then. See, this stuff doesn't make you necessarily a better reader. Oh, dude. Yeah, I used to do this. It's crazy because this is the kind of common advice you get, and this is the kind of thing I used to, try to do earnestly when I was in high school. I don't do this. Now, I do think this one's not bad right here. Surprising exclamation is cool, and confusing question mark is cool. Let me explain to you why though. Okay. I'll tell you why I like those. I have mentioned this in the last couple of days, but I'll try to do it in the summarized version of it right now. You can go ahead and underline claims, but I don't think you need to underline claims just because they're a claim. You can just underline anything, I think, that stands out to you. Okay, I think just by underlining things, it does make you feel more focused. It helps you focus. It helps reduce the likelihood of you being distracted. But I would say don't worry so much about whether it's a claim with a reason or evidence, because by the way, you can't. There's no claim to underline in literature. I would just underline anything that you think is worth underlining. Okay, it's totally fine to be loosey-goosey about that. I think the reason that you're underlining anything in the first place is just to have your physical condition and your mental condition tip-top, right? That's why you're underlining. Just to force your eyeballs to be looking at the page, okay? That's what you know how cats, when you shine like a laser pointer at like the wall, cats just look at it. It's the same thing you're doing to yourself with a pencil. You're just looking at it, okay? You're just looking at it. That's why you underline. You're not underlining to like have this perfect outline of like what the claims are and the reasons are and the evidence. That's not what you're doing. At least I don't think that's healthy, because what that does is it makes you like neurotic about what you can underline and what you shouldn't underline. And then some kids will actually go back and erase things. It's like, oh, that wasn't a claim, and then erase the underline. What the hell, man? You're wasting time when you do that. Don't do that. Just underline whatever you want, because the point of underlining is to just do that laser pointer thing on yourself. Just to make yourself like totally like just like totally absorbed in that reading. That's all you're doing. It's a purely physiological thing. That's my recommendation. Okay, my recommendation is don't worry about whether you're underlining something that's meaningful or not. It could be a totally meaningless thing. It doesn't matter as long as it's helping you stay focused, right? Just it's just helping you stay focused. Underline. Okay, that's why I underline, and it's why I suggest you underline. I think anyone who suggests that you should underline things by some sort of rational structure of like claims, reasons, counterpoints, blah, blah, blah. If anyone who suggests that, I don't think they're actually taking the test, because that's way too much stress. Honestly, that's way too much stress to be doing in real time. And it's not the kind of stress that's like necessary. It will make you a little sharper, that's true. But I don't know if that's the way to do it, because you can get overly perfectionistic about what the arguments are, what the arguments aren't. Real life arguments are sometimes kind of messy, so okay, I don't recommend a sort of structured approach to underlining. Okay, keywords. Honestly, like I've said this I've actually said this earlier today, but I'm going to say it one more time. The reason you're circling, again, it's almost. Hey Gregory, what's up? The reason you're circling is almost the same as the reason why you're underlining, okay? You're circling because you want to be able to see it again, to find it again, okay? It doesn't always have to be a keyword. It could just be a date. Like in 1999, blah, 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 blah. But you just want to be able to, now you just want to remember that, okay, if I circle it 1999, then later on, I can come back to it, 1999, and whenever I need it, right? So anything that you're afraid you're going to forget, and you want your eyeball to have like a target, right? So that it can kind of stick back on this word later on, you can circle it, okay? It doesn't have to be perfectly logical. That said, I do think there are some general concepts that are useful for like 90% of the times, they're pretty good to circle. Names. The first time that names come out, okay? The first time that concepts come out, like a thing that's specifically defined, okay? The first time that certain years or dates when they come out, okay? Those are kinds of things that you oftentimes want to circle just because when you're reading so fast, you forget the names of these people, right? So you want to be able to go back to it, or you forget when something happens, so you want to be able to go back to it. Your eyes, the beautiful thing about a circle, okay, is that your eye just wants to find it. The eye just wants to find it. So use your circles, again, not to be super logical about what the circles can and cannot be. It's not like that. The circles are merely a physiological tool to help your eyes come back to it later on, just like the underline is a physiological tool to help your eyes stay focused while you're reading, okay? There are two different purposes. Okay, the underline with the point of the pencil and you underlining things, what that's doing is it's keeping your eyes on the page instead of your brain on like the person whose perfume next to you smells good, right? Like it's keeping you from being distracted. And then the circle is keeping you from getting too nervous that you're going to forget it. It's like, oh, I circled it, so I'll definitely not forget it. I just need to go back and find that circle. Right? It's to help you reduce that fear that you're going to forget something. Okay, so that's what the circle is for. Yeah, I mean, how's it going? I'm chill, man. Today, no birthday party, so just getting started on my streaming late at night. Besides that, really no news. Well, I have some random news that probably no one will care about, but I reached Diamond in League of Legends Wild Rift, so I'm pretty happy about that. Okay, so now I'm thinking about quick notes in the margins of the passage. Plus and minus is not something I use because I have a pretty strong sense of the story, of the flow of an argument, so I kind of already remember where all the pluses and minuses are, even without doing it. But I do think it's a good idea. Pluses and minuses, they don't take a long time, and you don't have to overly analyze to do it. So it passes my test, okay? Anytime someone gives you an instruction, if it takes too much brain power just to follow that instruction, I would reject it, okay? And second, if it takes too much time to complete that instruction, I would reject it. Because during the test, any tips you get should be low brain power and low time cost, okay? Because these tips are not like, they're only an accessory to the actual reading and analyzing, okay? So they should only help you with reading and analyzing. So the harder they are to do and the more time it takes to do them, the less likely I am to accept that tip. Okay, so I think you should adopt the same standard. Be picky about the advice that you apply. Or at least, you don't necessarily have to be picky, you can just try it first. But when you try it, test for yourself whether it's overly difficult to use that tip or whether it takes too much time for you to complete the thing that you do when you do that tip, So make sure it kind of passes your test. Is something surprising? These two have different reasoning. So I think exclamation points are useful. Now, this is not something I think is as important as the question mark. I think the question mark is like super important. Okay, so I'll get back to that in a second. But the exclamation point, if you put an exclamation point, or sometimes, not sometimes, to this day, but ever since I was in high school, I've had this habit of saying like LOL, WTF, boo, or like INT for interesting, int, right? I would have a habit of just like writing these quick three-letter comments next to things as I read them. And this is, I think, more useful for general reading, but I think I can imagine how it could help you on the SAT, because it's only 3 letters, it's very quick and it's an emotional reaction, right? Because by doing that, it just keeps you, this is similar to like doing the underline, it just keeps you focused on the text and also emotionally engaged with the text, okay? But I would say this is more of a sort of bonus thing I wouldn't strongly recommend this particularly. I would just say try it, and if it works for you, it works for you. So yeah, you can put like an exclamation point when you're surprised by it. You can put like an INT when you're interested in it. You can put like a LOL or like a WTF, right? Whenever you have that kind of response. But I guess you could do LMAO, but the problem with LMAO is that M takes too many strokes, right? M, that's like too many, that's too long. LOL is so much faster, right? LMAO is so many letters, especially that M. So I wouldn't recommend LMAO. You want to just like tighten up, on this, like repetitive things that take too much time they're gonna add up to a lot of time. So avoid that. Is something confusing? Write a question mark. I think this is super and stupidly important. This one is stupidly important. I have mentioned why yesterday or the day before, at least. At least once I've explained why I think that the question mark is stupid important. But I'm going to say it one more time. Today, when you read something and when you're confused by it, if you don't do anything and you just move on to the next sentence, what happens? What happens? Well, if you're like me, and I think I'm speaking for most people, okay? What happens is you get this feeling that, I don't really understand this text. And so your confidence drops down a little bit. Now, second question, you skipped that part. It was hard for you to understand. Maybe 2 other parts, you kind of skipped them. They were hard for you to understand. And now you're going into the questions. What happens? What happens? Again, I think if you're like me, or what I think most people are like, what happens is your confidence not only really dropped in your understanding of the text, okay, but now you're starting to forget the parts you were even certain of. Because even though you read this whole 2-column text and understood 90% of it, and you only misunderstood like these 3 sentences, okay, the other 10%. This 10% has this sort of insidious ability to sort of just take over your psychology, your psyche, and be like, oh, you don't really understand this text. So that 10% feels a lot more like 50% at some point. So then when you're going through A, B, C, D, your common sense tells you that B is the correct answer, but C, what C does is C has this kind of very weird and interesting way of like putting things that makes it seem like it could be the case. And moreover, it kind of pokes that 10%, you know, it's like, oh, that's the part I didn't understand. And then by this point, your confidence has been so sufficiently denigrated, or degraded, sorry, not denigrated. Your confidence has been so sufficiently degraded that instead of going for the common sense, relying on your 90% understanding of the text, instead you take this crazy gamble on this 10% talking to you and making you lacking confidence. And it throws this whole other reading of the whole text. It's like, oh, maybe I didn't understand the sarcasm. And it makes you all paranoid about it. And it makes you choose things that you wouldn't otherwise choose. It drops your confidence way too much. That's what happens when you read something you don't understand and you just let it spread. Don't do that. Instead of letting it spread, you should contain it. And how do you contain it? How do you keep the lack of confidence from growing? Just put a question mark next to it. Put a question mark next to it, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's that one thing that I didn't understand, right? You can say it in a sort of neutral, cool, calm, rational way. Oh yeah, that's that one thing that I didn't understand. I understood everything else, but that's that one thing I didn't understand. I put a question mark next to it. I can go back to it and double check what it means again later if I have time, right? It makes you way more chill about that whole situation. Okay, that's what I think. That's what I think the question mark is useful for. So I strongly recommend it. For me, I do have one. Circle the and. I do something that's similar to these, but I don't do it every single time, which is what the instruction makes it sound like you should do. I only do it for what I think are the important ones, the big transitions. So it only happens maybe twice or 3 times in a whole text. It usually doesn't happen. Actually, sometimes, you know what, sometimes I do a lot more, sometimes I do a lot less, actually. I'm sort of like loosey-goosey about it. I put triangles. I put triangles on logical transitions that signal a different type of, a progression in the argument. So, for example, one way to progress in the argument is by transitioning from a concession or qualification to your thesis. It's like, for example, I'll say something pretty normal, pretty typical, I mean. Most people think that you should exercise more. And it's true, the benefits of exercise are generally, they're indisputable. However, you should exercise if that's what you want to do. Okay, and I'm just making this I just made this up, right? But I might put a triangle on that word, however, just because it would help me find the transition later on. That's the main reason why I would do it. And I think I tend to use triangles more when I find it hard for me to follow the argument. So I don't tend to use triangles when I feel like I already understand the flow of the argument. I only do it when I feel like I'm struggling and I need to use my hand to force my brain to work a little harder. You know, that's kind of like the trick. That's true generally. Don't do two, I don't know if doing 2 read-throughs is worth it. At least because see, my fear of doing 2 read-throughs is that your first read-through itself might be too wasteful and lossy, like leaky, lossy, you know. I don't know. I don't do 2 read-throughs. I just read it once, and I read it once, and I just I try to build the map as best as I can. But what you might notice when you actually see me read is that the moment that I don't understand something, I go back up. I don't go down. People think that reading is unidirectional. You're always just reading downwards. You're not. You're reading down and then you go up, but not just to reread. A lot of times people think that you just reread the same sentence, but then you're being stupid. Like you're just rereading the thing that you don't understand. What you should be doing is you should be jumping up to look for the thing that would help for the thing that you just missed. So you actually jump farther up than you might. I think if you watch me read, you'll notice that I jump pretty far up when I feel like I'm lost, right? I jump pretty far up to see to try to remind myself of the answer to this question that I have, which probably came out sometime before. So that's something that requires a lot of training. I don't think you can improve it in like the next 3 days, but pay attention to how real people read. If you pay attention to how real people read, you'll notice that this like generically like 2 read-through thing, like who actually does that ever? Who really does that? I don't know. I am just fixing my understanding as I go. I don't do 2 read-throughs to get like a partial understanding and a fuller understanding. I don't do that. Okay. But this is hard for me to say it's bad. I don't think it's bad per se. My biggest concern is that that first read-through might just be kind of a waste of time. I don't know, man. I'm iffy about that one. I'm not sure. So far, I don't think I generally agree with most of this stuff. I think I'm generally disagreeing with most of this stuff. This is true. I would just go one step further. So I don't disagree with this, but I would take it one step further and say, basically predict. I like the idea of predicting a lot better. So earlier I said that you should not ask yourself questions about the text. Instead, you should just simulate what the text would probably look like. Okay? And as you simulate what the text would probably look like, you're going to actually read the real text and you're comparing against your simulation. And as you make those comparisons, you'll notice that there are certain parts that are very different from what you expected. Every single time that you're surprised, your brain would naturally want to make new predictions. Now, in the pressure of the time constraints, you might not actually make a new prediction. But after like reading a paragraph, I think this would be a really good reading habit for actually building up long-term your actual reading abilities. You should read a paragraph and then be like, oh, what do I think the next paragraph will be like? Okay, what do I think will happen now in this next chapter, right? In the next paragraph of this story, in the next paragraph of this argument. And make like another mini simulation for what will happen, okay? And then be ready to be surprised again, because maybe it'll go very differently from what you're expecting. So, I don't know, just merely summarizing, I think is weaker than actually predicting what's going to happen next, because predicting what's going to happen next also requires you to kind of summarize to yourself internally what did just happen. Okay, you have to know what just happened in order to have a good prediction of what's going to happen next. Step 5 review is basically the same as step 4, except it's at the macro level for the whole passage. And I would say I don't do it personally, but I kind of do my sort of like, what is it? In Korean we say 정리, which is such a flexible word, but in English we don't have like a word that's just like 정리. In step five, instead of step five, what I do is I just sort of, um, I don't know actually. Uh, I don't. What I'm pretty sure I don't do. I don't like summarize what this was in my own words. I don't do that. You know, that just feels like this little chore that someone's making me do. It's not something I do naturally, I think. I think I'm mostly focusing on like how similar or different that was from my own predictions, from my own simulation. Like, oh, that's kind of that. Wow, that really ended a little bit differently from what I expected. I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I thought would happen. You know, and that's basically all I do, and then I move on. You know, so it's a totally different model of reading from this SQ3R. Um, my model of reading is not about me just saying things out loud to myself. My model of reading is really fundamentally based on trying to imagine what kind of reading this would be and comparing it and letting myself be surprised by the actual thing of what it is. Okay. There might be, I bet there's some, I mean, I bet I'm not the only person that thinks this. I bet there's some sort of research word that I could like look up somewhere on Google Scholar and find it. I just don't know what it is. I don't know what that word would be. Okay. I don't know, man. I don't know. I want to see what people say. Yeah, scanning doesn't make any sense in literature. Well, I mean, it does not make no sense. But scanning doesn't make any sense within that time constraint. For my son. Yo, man, we gotta have actual people who are. Yeah, won't it? Vocabulary. Reading fast is one of those curses, huh? Where the faster you read, the less you understand. And the less you understand, the less confident you are. Okay. I still do not understand what the claim is. Okay. Quick and easy strategy. All right, let's move on to the next strategy. So I'm looking at part 2, just to make sure. Yes, this is part 2, so I'm going to go into it. Rip rap. Ah, we're finally getting this. Rephrase if possible over the question types. Read around and predict. Yeah. This I super agree with, especially when if you're starting your prep like at least a month before the test, and you're taking at least like one practice test per week. Especially the first couple practice tests, I would not focus so much on the time management. I would focus a lot more on your fundamental reading skills, and your reading and test taking skills, both of them. And one of the best ways to do it is by covering the answer choices, forcing yourself to predict, going back to the passage, coming up with a better prediction, right? Because you're forcing yourself to predict without looking at the passage first. And then looking at the answer choices and going to process elimination, okay? And actually the golden standard is that you should be able to, okay, if you want to be a 1600 or 800 EBRW reader, you should be able to cover the choices, predict the answer, and then not even look at the passage anymore, okay, because you already read it, you have a pretty good map of what it said, And you should just be able to choose it with high confidence. Not choose it with like low confidence, you're just sort of guessing, but choose it with high confidence. And out of 10 questions, you should be able to do this maybe 3 times or 4 times. The no look, I still don't have a catchy word for this, but like the no look answer. You have to be able to do out of 10 questions, 3 of them, 3 to 4 of them, you should be able to do no look answers. High confidence. Okay, and that will save you so much time that you'll be able to take a little bit more time doing the reading in the first place, and also you'll be able to take a little bit more time on the harder questions. Cover the choices. Super agree. Not if possible. If confused, rephrase the question, but not even rephrase the question. I would even use the how, what, or why. If you're confused, just break the question down into smaller parts and turn them into sentences that you understand, that you can fill it in with your knowledge of the text. Okay, so if the passage talks about blah, 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 and then the question starts with, the author mentions this one technology, the author's mention of this technology, blah, 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 primarily serves to, right? You can just do that. And if that mention of the technology, you have to actually go back and look at the line numbers, right? So it might be hard to remember that part. And then primarily in order to, right? That feels like a whole separate part of the sentence. So if you want to break it down into 2 sentences, you could break it down into 2 sentences. You could say, the author mentions that this technology offers cost-saving measures, period. Second sentence, still the same question. This primarily serves to, or if you want to combine it into one sentence, you could say, because the author wants to suggest another benefit of adoption of this technology, something like that, right? Then that would be your prediction, that second part, right? But why should you rephrase the question into a different question mark question when you could just turn it into a prediction, right? Until a predicted answer, in a sentence form. I think asking yourself a question is cognitively more demanding than just saying a sentence that you think you agree with. Saying a sentence that you think you agree with is, I think, a lot easier, in other words, than asking yourself a question about that thing. So I wouldn't rephrase the question generally speaking. I would just break it down into smaller sentences that I can agree with. If I'm confused. If I'm not confused, then I'm just going to read that question and then I'm just going to finish that sentence, right? Because 90% of the questions are just broken off sentences. They're like the question stems, right? They're just the beginning of a sentence, and you just need to fill in the rest at the end of the sentence, and that's your answer. So, yes, I don't agree with step 2, generally speaking. Yeah, I strongly don't. What does third paragraph do? I would just finish it. The function can best be described as a metaphor. Embellishment, a concession, right? I want to just finish that sentence. I would rather just finish that sentence. I don't know if anyone else disagrees with me, but that's if you told me to turn a question into another question, I would feel like I feel like I would waste time. I feel like I would lose time. So if somebody else does not think that happens for them, I'm curious what your experience is, because I find it hard to imagine this saving you time. Okay, yeah, I already said this in step one, basically, but basically you want to cover the choice, then you want to predict it first. You don't want to look at the passage right away. You want to use your you want to use your memory of the passage to actually predict the answer first. Okay, and sometimes you can't actually do a hard prediction, but you can do a sort of like range, like, oh, it's gonna be kind of like about this or this or this, but it's not gonna be about that. Like, you're gonna have a rough area that you can work with when you make that prediction. Then, if you have pretty high confidence, you should just be able to go straight into the answer choices and just choose and move on. But if you're not very confident, then you probably want to go into the passage, find the thing that confirms your answer, okay? And then go to the answer choices. And if you can't find something that confirms your answer, then you have to reread that part of the passage to sort out the actual answer, your prediction, to come up with a new prediction for the answer to this question. Then you go back to that question stem, you clarify for yourself what your prediction is, and then you look at the answer choices, and then you go through this part. Answer a question in own words, uncover the choices, cross the ones that don't match. By the way, this whole thing about, honestly, this is so generalized that I don't think this is generally useful. I mean, it's only generally useful. It's not like specifically useful. Guys, you shouldn't just be looking at the beginnings and ends of paragraphs. You should actually have a decent map for where the relevant information was. Okay, you might not remember 100% what everything said, okay, but you should know that, oh, this is the part where the grandpa came out, this is the part where the son came out and they had that one awkward interaction. Oh, this is the part where the narrator, like the observer, comes out and makes some commentary. Now you should know that. You should know that when you do your first reading. If you do your whole first reading, you don't know that, you kind of wasted your first reading. Okay, so instead of just going through line references and just being dependent on this sort of generic shape of all passages, this sort of general advice for all passages. No, you should use your map for that one specific passage. Every time you read, you should have a map of that passage. That passage specifically. See, I would skip this rephrase. I would definitely be like, example 1, the author includes the discussion of the scone, the donut, and muffin, and then at that very moment, my brain will light up. My map of the passage will light up. It's like, oh yeah, well, that was at the middle of this. That was like in the middle of the first column, and that was the part where he was sort of talking about like culinary differences between France and England. Right? So then now I already have my prediction. The author includes the discussion of the scone, the donut, and the muffin primarily to highlight culinary differences between two countries. Right? Forget the rephrasing. I'm just going to make that prediction. I'm just going to make the prediction. Okay? And then, if my prediction is a little iffy, then I will go back using my map. I would already know where to go back to. I will go back to it. I will look at it. I'll confirm my prediction, and then I'll go back to the answer choices and then cross out the ones that don't match and choose the one that matches. By the way, my focus tends to be more on finding the one that matches rather than crossing out the ones that don't match. Okay, I'm looking very strongly for the one that does match. Okay. At least if you're trying to get like a perfect score, I think that probably should be your habit as well. If you're left with multiple choices, here's my general tip. Okay, nothing here is particularly offensive. It's fine, but I just want to say something from me to you. If you notice that you're bouncing between B and D and B and D and B and D, and your eyes are just going from B and D and B and D and just those words that are within B and D. I have a question. Where are your eyes not going? Just think about it. Where are your eyes not going? Should be pretty clear. There's two places it's not going. It's not going to the question stem, and it's not going to the part of the passage that has been lit up in your map. Usually, when you read B and D and B and D, especially when you feel time pressure and you just want to force a selection, you just go back and forth and you get this obsession of just like kind of finding one word to cross out between B and D. Yeah, but that could work if you're really that close to the answer. But typically speaking, it helps out. It helps a lot more to just zoom out a little bit. Read the question again. Read the question stem slowly, calmly, coolly one more time. Make sure you didn't misread it by any chance. And then do another prediction. It's like, yeah, but the passage was saying this though. So just to use this example over here, what was this? So you just reread this and be like, the author includes a discussion of the scone, the donut, and the muffin primarily to highlight cultural differences, though. That was what the passage said, right? Just remind yourself of that. Now, if you have to go back to the passage, actually go back to the passage and then double check, then go ahead and double check and then come back to B and D and then choose the one that's closer to your prediction. If you still can't get it, then you should just choose one, move on, come back, because it's going to waste too much time. By the way, I do strongly agree with this. Hey, now that's interesting. Maybe that's right. Versus B basically restates what you read. Don't go for the weird, interesting one. Go for the one that seemed closer to like your original common sense. Okay, when you first read it, especially. And this is also so obvious to me that I never actually thought about saying this out loud, but this is true. This is true. Nothing debatable will ever be the right answer. Except the SAT are human beings, so every once in a while. But it's pretty rare. It honestly, compared to like just tests that you generally see, SAT is very high quality. The number of like offensive or debatable or like kind of like confusing questions, they're very few. Okay, I trust SAT quite a bit actually. To come quite a bit to come up with pretty unambiguous answers. Like the right answer is clearly right. I mean, yeah, sure. I don't disagree. Cool. Practice area. This is pretty funny. Yeah, strongly agree. But even if you're not good at reading fast, just read the whole passage, don't skim. This is funny. Yo. This is only kind of general. The prediction does feel like it would take more time. This one I agree with. Prediction does feel like it would take more time, but actually, like I said in the last couple of days, prediction saves you a lot of time because instead of going to A, B, C, D, where you're ending up juggling a bunch of things, and if it's even a moderately difficult question, what happens with A, B, C, D is you don't just go A, B, C, D. You go A, passage B, passage C, passage D, passage B, passage D, passage. It becomes a complete mess. to do that. So it's so much simpler to just have like, I have one answer that I think is correct. I'm going to find it. That's the correct one. Then you just do a quick double check. Is it A? Like, let's say you found it in B. So, B seems like the correct one. And then you look at A and C and D, and you're just comparing it against B. That's all you're doing. That's way easier. Way easier. Saves a lot of time. Also saves a lot of stress. Okay, I think that's good enough for now. So let's go into explicit information. Quick guide. Created by a different person. Interesting. I'm kind of tired today, guys. Let's see, I wonder if these are really quick. You're gonna see 3 to 4 questions that basically ask you explicitly, according to the passage, something happens, states that, indicates that. So you're just gonna paraphrase. Common errors. Wait, hang on. What would be a common error for this? I can't even imagine, all right? Misplaced information. Okay, that sounds roughly correct. Seems like a not common error. Like, it might be a common error within these confines, but it doesn't seem like an overall common error. Like, I feel like people generally don't, when they make mistakes, they don't generally make mistakes on the explicit information questions unless the question the question stem and the answer choices are actually complicated. The wording is like too hard to understand for you guys. But generally speaking, I don't feel like this is what you get wrong, what people get wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong, but this seems like an unusual area to be weak on. Ooh, searching for keywords, bro. Now, use your map, jump to the part of the map that you know that you should be going to. Okay? If you don't have a map, you've already lost, and so you need to build that map faster and better next time. Okay, so just one thing about this, it says according, states, indicates. Now, if this is something that's so built into me that I don't even think about the word differences, but yes, based, inferred, implied is different from according, states, indicates, right? So just be aware that some questions are more factually oriented about what it's actually explicitly stating, and some questions are going to require you to bridge some connections and come up with your own inference. Okay. It won't be directly in the it won't be directly stated in the passage, but it will directly be in it. Okay. Like if I say something like, boys are unlike girls in every way. Girls don't smell. I'm doing some very reductive, very stupid. I'm doing a very stupid, very reductive, even like a very anti-feminist example. Okay, let me just go with this. Okay, boys are different from girls in every way. Girls smell nice. And then I finish that passage talking. Then there is an inference you can make. The inference is boys don't smell nice. You know why? Because you're taking this premise, boys are different from girls in every way, and then you're taking this other little factoid about the girls that they smell nice, and now you're gonna apply it back to this logical premise that the boys are always the opposite of girls. Now, does that mean that the author is right or wrong? No, but you should be able to understand the author. So the author says something like that, you should be able to be like, oh, so from the author's perspective, you can infer that the author thinks that all boys smell badly. Smell bad. Okay? So that's directly in the passage, even though it's not stated. Kind of wish this wasn't so general, but yeah. Small leaps, I guess that generally makes sense. Don't use your imagination. Like everything has to come from the text. Everything has to come from the text. And then the searching for keywords, I've already replied to that. Quick guide, point of view. For the point of view questions, my biggest tip is, hey guys, use the word I. Turn yourself into that person. As Albert Einstein, I have been arguing with Ronald Reagan about this, and now I believe, okay, now I don't know why Albert Einstein and Ronald Reagan are arguing, but whatever, like just use the word I, like assume the person of the author, and it helps you view things from their perspective and kind of filter all the other stuff out. Makes it a lot easier to keep track of what you're supposed to be answering, okay? So if it says the narrator of the passage can best be described as, oh, this is not a point of view. Okay, this is kind of a little different from the other ones, but here. The author of passage 2 would most likely agree with which statement? You should just be like, oh, as the author of passage 1, I was arguing about all of this stuff, so let me look at A, B, C, D. Oh, I would definitely agree with A, right? Just say the word I and it helps you focus. Smith's attitude towards, so like some attitude towards coffee, right? I'm Smith, I don't like coffee because of these reasons. So say it out loud as if you are Smith, and that would help you clarify. I don't know, I feel like these are sort of generic. These questions, I don't feel like they're normally worded this way. It's kind of strange. Kind of want to see some example questions. It's kind of confusing. Yeah, flip-flopping sucks. Near misses. It's like this new concept, but they're just talking about extreme positions. Going through all of these quick guides, I don't know if it's worth it, actually. It's probably just better to just go through real practice tests. So I would say one thing about evidence questions is you want the thing itself, the thing that really directly, like if it says that the author believes that this treatment is ineffective, okay, in the previous question, and then in this next question, you have to come up with the evidence. You wanna just choose not the why he thinks it's ineffective. You want to just choose the part of the passage where it says, Dr. Burgess vehemently disagrees. Like you want to go with that particular line, the one where it says he disagrees. Now, sometimes that's not going to be one of the answer choices, in which case you're going for the next closest one. But you want to go for the most explicit connection, not like some sort of like a logically secondary connection, like, oh, this is the reason why he disagrees. Okay. This is the effect of his disagreement that is causing a controversy. Those are all second order relationships. You want to go for the first order relationship, the direct thing itself. Okay, that's the main thing. That's the hardest. That's sometimes really hard. Sometimes it's really confusing. This seems just like a... I'm just gonna move on. I don't have any special comments on these because they're kind of sort of vanilla enough that I don't think they're like wrong. I don't have any particular passion for them, or anything like that. But it's just that, yeah, it's better to just look at the questions, I think, themselves instead of talking about them in the general. Main idea. Main idea versus summarize. This sentence literally is not these two, but okay. But okay. Moving on. Too narrow, too broad, too extreme, too weak. Outside information, being imaginative, sure. I just don't feel like main idea questions are the kinds of things that you tend to typically get wrong, and if you do, it's because of the wording of the answer choices. So I'm gonna kind of just move on from that. I feel like Khan Academy could do this particular section a lot better by collecting data on the questions that people are getting wrong and prioritizing the ones that people actually get wrong a lot instead of going through every single type and saying something about every single type. Okay, it just seems a little like, it's not like when I'm a student I'm gonna go through every single one of these. Oh, I got one analogical reasoning wrong, and then like come up and kind of look for this particular tip. It doesn't seem natural to go through this. Yeah, you should be okay. Consider skipping entirely. Yeah, I guess that's not a bad idea either. Remember, you don't lose points by just guessing randomly, so. You do need to use your own words. I think with analogies, you need to have that sort of ability to like summarize the thing and then to create your own analogy, really. So. Yeah, let's move on. Overall structure, this is good. If like, earlier I talked about triangles, basically if you can imagine, right? I've talked about science passages before, I've talked about literature passages, like how they are structured. So just have like have triangles, for science passages. When you move from the background to the hypothesis itself, have a triangle. When you move from the hypothesis to the design of the experiment, put a triangle there. When you move from the design of the experiment to the results, put a triangle there. When you move from the results to the to the discussion, put a triangle there. But you don't have to do it every time. You can just do it. You can just do it for the ones that are hard to catch because they're like in the middle of a paragraph or something. Only the ones that are hard to catch. I don't put triangles all the time. I'm not strict about it. Lots of false negatives where I didn't triangle the thing that I could have triangled. It's fine, but as long as you're paying attention to the structure of the overall passage and you're seeing how it changes, then you should be good on this. Check the bones, the top and bottom. Yo, man. Yeah, final paragraph is useful, but that's not the whole structure, right? You gotta, yeah. This seems like a pretty meaningless. This starting to feel like a rather meaningless exercise. The main purpose, the first purpose, rhetorical purpose. The main thing about rhetorical purpose questions is that you wanna focus on, again, you want to stay connected to like how the author wants to move from a concession to an argument, right? From a contrast to an analogy of the thing itself, right? From a definition to like an argument. Like you wanna focus on like what the author is trying to accomplish there, or what the narrator is trying to accomplish there. So you need to develop this ability to analyze the form of a text. Okay. Oh, this deepens the conflict. This adds another layer to the conflict. This sheds light on the inner conflict in this character, right? This externalizes the inner state of this character. This resolves the old conflict and introduces a different one, right? You need to be able to talk about literature as a form. You need to be able to talk about scientific research as a form, or scientific essays as a form. You need to be able to talk about the form of it, not just like the thing that's actually happening in it, okay, the thing that's being said in it, but the way that it's structured and shaped and how it progresses from one area to the next, okay? So you need to be able to do that when you're talking about purpose. Basically, the first paragraph mainly serves two, right? Basically, the implicit question is, in the first paragraph, the author is trying to, okay, that's kind of what you're thinking when you read these kinds of questions. Right, this is pretty much right. Like, you're not trying to get into the content of you're trying to focus on what it accomplishes. I kind of wish we had some examples in front of me. I'm not creative enough right now to make up the examples right away, but yeah. Ooh, that's a lot of tips. I'm gonna move on. Part-whole relationships. What is this? Primarily assertive. It's kind of the same thing, no? Feels like, yeah, it's the same tips, right? Words in context, cool. A lot of kids get these wrong. You gotta get good at these. Remember, guys, just go back to that original sentence, read the whole original sentence, but instead of the word itself, say the word blank, and then fill it in with words that you would naturally use on your own. Don't try to fill it in with unnatural words that you're just squeezing in because it's SAT level. Try to fill it in with words that you would naturally use on your own. Okay, and then and then keep that imprint, the grammatical structure of that. Go back to the question and then keep repeating that phrase back to yourself, and you'll get it. You'll generally get it right. The plug in the choices, this is only a last resort, okay? You should be able to do both of those steps in one. Word choice. I really wish we had examples for every single one. Oh well. Word choice is a specific type of rhetorical purpose. It's like a type of rhetorical purpose question where we're focusing specifically on that word. So I don't really have anything special to say about this that's any different from rhetorical purpose questions or like part-whole relationships. All three of these just seem like the same to me. So moving on. Evaluating evidence. This happens very infrequently, right? Yeah, this is good stuff. You should be able to have good argumentative skills when you do this. Yeah, man, this is just too much information. It's just all of these quick guys one by one. I don't find these to be very helpful. This doesn't seem super helpful, honestly. Kind of wish if anybody, I'm starting to lose my ability to articulate sentences. If any of you guys have specific questions though about any of these, I'm more than happy to sort of review any of these tips and talk about it and kind of flesh it out with more detail. But I just find myself being bored by reading all of these, and it doesn't seem like there's that much interesting content here, you know, because it's so general. You need to see the actual question, the answer choices, and the answer choices are the ones that's going to really make you think about it. Remember when you see a graph, when I read a graph, guys, I read it right after the passage, and as I'm reading the graph, I'm trying to draw connections to the passage. Does it agree with the passage? Does it disagree with the passage? Which part of the passage? Which part of the passage? You know, I'm trying to fit it into my map of the passage, okay? So make sure you're doing that on your own too. Okay. Put your finger on it. Physical tips like that, those are always useful, you know. Learn to use your body properly. Use your body, your pen, your pencil, I mean. You know, learn to use the physical aspects of the test taking to keep yourself more on top of it. Dude, I'm just so exhausted by these. I'm so exhausted by these. Okay, did I get through all of these? Seems like it, huh? Let me see. Oops, yeah, gotta refresh because it's to save my memory on my computer that I have that Chrome thing. SAT reading test tips share space. Let's look at this. These names are, it's the same names, the same people coming out. I beg to differ. It's such a funny way to reply. I strongly disagree with this person. You should just read the whole thing. You should just read the whole thing. It makes it way easier. If you want, I don't think this person, I think it's possible. I think it's physically possible to get the right, get a perfect score without reading the whole thing. I just think it would require a superhuman amount of energy. Reading the whole thing is just so inefficient. Not reading the whole thing, it seems so inefficient. Your logic gets all chopped up. You're just brute forcing every single answer choice. It's just painful as hell. I wouldn't do it. And by the way, it's not a good habit for future. Like the LSAT, for example, if you want to take the LSAT, you know, was one of the harder reading tests. I don't know if the other reading tests could be harder, like the GMAT or the GREs. I feel like the LSAT would be the hardest if you want to go into grad school. Yeah, it's not a good habit, man. You're not gonna, like, not reading the thing. If you want a perfect score on the SAT, and even if it is physically possible to get a perfect score while doing this, yo, that amount of energy that you waste just trying to like brute force all those answers like that, like you're not gonna, that waste is not gonna be forgiven when you take something even more rigorous like the LSAT. You want to just read it once and have such an amazing map of it that you don't even have to look back at the passage anymore for like, you know, for like 4 out of 10 questions, right? And then for the other 4 out of 10 questions, you're only going back to confirm your right answers, and then the remaining 2 out of 10 questions are the ones that you have to actually kind of read the passage again to figure it out. Your map of the passage should be really good when you read. This is such a, I strongly disagree with this. But I'll set it out there like a hypothesis, like a good science experiment, guys. Because you guys should be able to test it. If anything I say is true, you should be able to test it, and it should feel true for you too. So the way I'll say it is, I strongly believe if you follow this guy's advice right here, I strongly believe if you follow this guy's advice here, where you don't read the whole thing, okay, then what will happen is you're gonna require, for these questions, okay, you're gonna require a lot more brute forcing, and that will feel more physically tiring. That's what I believe will happen. Go ahead and test it for yourselves. Okay, so I pushed through all of these, but these these tips are so big in general that they're just so it was just really hard to even say anything super meaningful. So that's done for the reading. I think I'm done with the reading here. I think I've been able to say most of my. I think if you are coming to this sort of late and you're just sort of catching up, my day three stream yesterday, where I think I spent the last 20 minutes or so just sort of summarizing the biggest differences between what Khan Academy says and what I say. I think that's probably the real place to start. And then if you want to know exactly what I mean by that, then you should look at days 1, 2, 3, where I do the readings and the questions and I explain it one by one, okay? Because that's they're pretty long. It's several hours of content of me just streaming, but you can at least get a sense of what I'm talking about there. So that's that for the reading. I was hoping to start the writing today, but I'm just pooped. I am pooped. I'm pooped by this. I just went through all these quick guides. That was exhausting, man. Those quick guides were not very fun to get through. So the full passage walkthrough were much more interesting, I thought. So for the writing too, I think I'll zoom through the generic concept stuff, and I'll try to focus a lot more on the actual practice. I assume there's gonna be practice that comes out. Okay, guys. Today, I think that'll be it, and I'll see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll go over the writing.